Leave him alone. We're talking.
I'm Matt.
I'm Kerry.
We are the Stagmer brothers of Baltimore Knife and Sword. We're going to be building some of your favorite weapons, and some weapons that you've never seen before.
This is Man-at-Arms, Reforged.
We've done quite a few comic book builds, but we haven't done a DC one in a long time, not since our first episode aired, Batman's Wolverine Gauntlets. And we decided to return to the genre. So first up is Aquaman's Trident. In the comics, Aquaman's Trident is brass, and it's always glowing bright. But in the Justice League and the new Batman vs Superman movie, it's darkened steel. So Sam's gonna start with some mild steel, 1x1 bars, and draw out those points. It's called a trident, but it's more like a coincident. It's 5 points, not 3, so he's got to draw 5 identical points out, then he'll be getting the technical forging.
I've now forged all the points for Aquaman's Trident. This is really like a piece of architectural ironwork. 2 of the 4 points will have pass-throughs. A pole will be milled and then drifted to the sides of each of the spikes, and then it'll all be fit together. I'm going to take them to the milling machine to mill that slot and then hot drift them in the forge. I have my tools laid out to drift open that pass-through. I started with this guy. It's oblong or cat-shaped, so it can pass all the way through to get it started. Then I'm going to take the pass-through piece and drift it to final dimension. Once it's bottomed out, I knock it loose.
Righteous.
Before we can start the rough assembly, we have to shorten some of these pieces. Bill's just gonna hog some material off on the grinder and check it as he goes to make sure both sides are exactly the same. We now have to make the 2 central tines match the outer ones. Sam's gonna move to the forge and then to the anvil and create that angle.
We'll be making the points for this trident out of a separate hardenable material. Sam takes them to the anvil and forms them with a hand hammer.
Alright, it's time to start the rough assembly of this trident. So I got different shims and some magnets holding things where I want them. So I'm gonna start just tacking each of these points, bend them to where I want, and then when John comes in the morning, he'll put in all the final structural welds and we'll start blending from there. After getting my first side tacked in place, I mimic the same setup on the other side, get it tack welded, and it's finally starting to look like a pretty rad weapon. I went on the 80 grit and I smoothed over our overlay, gives it a much better organic feel. Now what I gotta do is add that nice V shape. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna heat it up in the forge, go to this V block, beat it in. It's gonna give us a good shape, and then when I slide it up onto the handle, I'll do some finish forming. Now that we have the main body completely welded, John's gonna start applying our harpoon points. We're gonna build a little extra weld up in the center, so when I go to grind, my peak will stand out nicely. Now that our points are all attached, it's time to start grinding to shape. I'm gonna start on an 8-inch wheel with a really rough grit and move all the way through to 220, and then we'll be ready for heat treat. As Sam has stated many times, 10 minutes in the forge saves you an hour on the grinder. I'm pretty sure he didn't want to save me any time on this build. I'm gonna end up using all the sanders in the shop to blend these welds. I need to use everything from big wheels to small wheels to slack sanders to get this job done. Now that I got my points refined and all the way through 220 grit, I still have a little bit of blending to do on the welds, but I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the heat treat. I'm just gonna heat up the points with the torch, quench them in oil. So as it turns out, even though I used almost every sander in the shop, still got to do a little of this by hand. I'm gonna use a handheld sander and just get in on some of those hard corners that I couldn't reach on the grinders.
So we're going to make basically a pommel for the Aquaman Trident. This is going to allow it to spin a little bit easier. It's going to have a little bit more weight from the backside. It'll balance out nice. It'll actually have harder thrust because of that. This is a slightly different version of the same technique you see us do with brassing. In this case, Matt's actually heating up the brass bristles rather than the object. It still lays the hot brass right onto the surface.
We've yet to have a full image of this trident in either a movie or a screenshot, so this has become our interpretation of what we think it should be. I think Aquaman would be proud to use it.
Click here to subscribe, or click here to watch more episodes. Thanks for watching Man-at-Arms Reforged. We need to know what you want the guys to build, so tell us in the comments below what weapons you want to see next.